Of the day is hibiscus, malvaceae. I went to all my go-to spots this morning biking in, trying to find some good hibiscus. All I had were those crappy little red ones which you see everywhere. So I don't have any samples to show you, but I'm sure you guys have seen hibiscus, right? It's really a pretty unique flower. And that's why it is the state and country flower kind of across the globe, from Malaysia, South Korea, Hawaii, and crappy clothing everywhere. What is kind of special about hibiscus, I guess we've seen it in another family as well, but that kind of fused andrecium and gynecium. What else have we seen that in? Passifloraceae, exactly. Really cool flowers, very showy. Probably in the majority of cases, they're going to be hummingbird pollinated just due to that size and shape. So today, we've gotten through most of the nitrogen-fixing clade with cucurbitales, phagales, and rosales. Today we're going to do fabales and then kind of move on from there. So kind of the main family in fabales is Fabaceae. Oh, I'll get to that in a second. So Fabales has 4 families, about 19,000 species. The 4 primary synapomorphies, of course, are DNA. You also have these vessel elements with only a single perforation. In addition, you get these really large green embryos. Think of like a green bean, large green embryos. And this ellagic acid. And I looked up this ellagic acid, and it's actually the lack of ellagic acid. So make sure you note that. So as I mentioned, Fabaceae used to be called leguminose legumes. Have about 630 genera, 18,000 species, putting it in around the 3rd largest family of angiosperms. What do you guys think are the 2 other largest families of angiosperms? We haven't done either, but just like thinking about biodiversity in general. Do you have any thoughts?
Poaceae.
Poaceae and orchids, exactly. And there's a lot of oh wait. Composites might be in there as well. I forget where they land. But there's a lot of dispute between like the orchid folks and the plant and the grass folks, and also the composite folks about who has the largest family. Legumes are cosmopolitan, meaning you can find them worldwide. In addition, they're very well known for this symbiotic association with rhizobium, which is a nitrogen-fixing bacteria. That's why a lot of people plant legumes as a cover crop. You're going to get some nitrogen fixation, and then you turn over those plants into the soil, and it goes straight into the soil. And those rhizobium are actually in these root nodules, which I have an image of. In terms of habit, legumes are trees, shrubs, herbs, basically anything and everything in terms of habit, but also in terms of habitat. So here are some pretty pictures of the nodules. This is kind of a close-up, so those are the roots themselves. And these lumpy little bits are the actual nodules in which those rhizobium hang out and fix nitrogen. So I've been sick all week and hoping I'll survive this. In terms of the leaves, they are nearly always alternate. You can have anything from simple to pinnate to bipinnate. You're nearly always going to see stipules. And of course, in some cases, those are going to develop into spines, such as an acacia. And what's kind of cool about legumes is that in a lot of cases, the leaves are going to respond to stimuli. Everyone's seen the sensitive plant, mimosa?
Yeah.
So that's a Fabaceae, where you can touch it, and they automatically just like kind of close up. But stimuli can be anything from light, heat, I think wind, touch in the case of mimosa. etc. Here are some pretty pictures. Oh, that's kind of crappy. Here's a better picture of the stipules right there. You can kind of see it there. But I mean, in nearly every legume we see, there's going to be some kind of stipule. In terms of the inflorescences, enormous variability. We've got racemes, spikes, cymes, tight clusters and heads. The flowers can be anything from unisexual to bisexual, actinomorphic to zygomorphic. You're nearly always going to have five sepals and 5 petals, though. As we've seen in class, both the sepals and the petals can sometimes be fused. There's kind of a quintessential legume shape, which I'll get into, flower shape, which I'll get into in a second. The stamens few to many, but you are nearly always going to have one carpel with one locule. And then this kind of marginal placentation, which is where, more or less where the ovules are found in that fruit. And you're going to get a superior ovary. The fruits themselves, I think you guys all know what a green bean looks like. That's more or less what you're always going to find with Fabaceae. It varies in terms of size and color, and that's about it. Otherwise, they're just big green beans. They can be dry, they can be fleshy. Sometimes they're going to be more compressed than in other cases. You do sometimes get these winged legumes, but again, it's pretty consistent. If you look at a thing and it just kind of looks like a green pea or like a pea pod, it's probably a legume. Lumens. How many people have recently gone walking in the woods and gotten those terrible, spiky little, kind of looks like a green bean, but then they just dehiss into like little single parts? Mm-hmm. I got like 1 million yesterday collecting plants for you guys. It was the worst thing ever. So they're basically just green beans, but they break into these single sections. I think if you saw them, you would know exactly what I'm talking about. So with Fabaceae, you're either going to have these legumes or laments. Lament about laments. So here are the legumes. Again, all kind of look like green beans. Lots of variation in terms of size. Terrible photos. So Fabaceae is traditionally split into 3 subfamilies. The first is Mimosoideae, with about 2,500 species, and they're typically found in the tropics to subtropics. Caesalpinoideae, 2,700 species, again tropics to subtropics. And then the Papilionoideae, which has the vast majority of the species diversity with about 12,500 species, and they're found everywhere. However, of course, with a whole lot of new molecular data, we're finding that while Mimosoideae and Papilionoideae are real things, Caesalpinoideae is not monophyletic. And so I think they're currently working on renaming and redistributing that silly subfamily. So Mimosoideae, you've got a lot of trees and shrubs. You don't really find herbs. They nearly always have these bipinnate leaves. Flowers are unisexual or bisexual, nearly always actinomorphic. Calyx, you're going to get these 5-sepal tubes, which are really small. Same thing with the corolla and the petals. You're going to get a lot of stamens, and that's actually what you typically see with Mimosoideae, is that big kind of bushy thing are actually a ton of stamen. Not petals, not individual flowers, just stamens. Examples include mimosa, acacia, and albizia. We've got, I think, just one example in class. So here you can see an example. So with a lot of mimosoideae, you have this kind of big balls of stamens. But what you're actually seeing is a number of different flowers all kind of grouped together to give that kind of brush appearance. Any questions? We good? Cool. Oh, there you go. So you can see we probably have like 10 separate flowers there, and these are all stamen. So sessile pinoideae, you also only have trees and shrubs, not so much herbs. The leaves are usually pinnate, occasionally bipinnate, occasionally simple. The flowers are going to be bisexual and zygomorphic. The corolla consists of 5 petals, typically with a single banner or standard inside the wings, so that's like a kind of the top one, and then you've got the 2 wings, and then you have these 2 keels, which you'll get a better picture of in a second. Stamens, you'll usually have 10, occasionally many. Examples of this are redbud, which you have a ton of around here, Boinia, Gladitia, or otherwise known as honey locust. I'm not sure what that is. Here are some pictures. So here would be the banner or standard, this kind of top main one, and then you've got the keel at the bottom and the wings kind of in the middle. This is better shown in the Papilionoideae. Sessile pinoideae is kind of just like a less pronounced version, and it's all the same words. Okay, Papilionoideae, again, 12,000 species. You got a ton of herbs. Occasionally you have trees and shrubs. The flowers are bisexual and zygomorphic. Corolla, you're going to have 5 petals. Again, you have this very large standard or banner outside the wings. Then you have the 2 small wings, and then you have the 2 keel petals, which are fused to form a single keel. You're also going to get the 10 stamens, and you can have this monodelphous or diadelphous, which literally translates to 1 brotherhood or 2 brotherhood, in which all the filaments are kind of fused with monodelphous, or with diadelphous, you're going to have nearly all of them fused with like 1 not fused and kind of just hanging out. Okay. Classic pea flower, you're going to have the big old banner, and then you're going to have the 2 goofy little wings, and then you're going to have the 2 keel petals, which kind of fuse together and create that kind of point that we saw in lab, I guess 2 weeks ago now, from which, if you poked it down, the anthers would emerge. So in this case, this guy is diadelphous because you've got the fusion of 9 stamens and then that one kind of goofy free stamen. Yeah, very classic papilio flower. Examples include beans, peas, alfalfa, clovers, lentils, soybeans. All very important in terms of food, agriculture, etc. So now we've gone through all the 4 major clades that do nitrogen fixation. And we can zoom back out to the rosids, in which you've got the malvids and the favids. And we're going to go into the malvids a little bit, which have always included included Brassicales and Malvales and Sapodales, but recently pulled in Crossosomatales and Myrtales and Geraniales. And we're going to start with Myrtales. So Myrtales has 14 families, 9,000 species. Synapomorphies, of course, include DNA. The vessel elements will actually have these goofy little pits, vestured pits, with small projections from the cell wall. I think I got an image. There we go. Isn't that pretty? Pits. In addition, the stems have this internal phloem, which I think I have a picture of too. There you go. Internal phloem, rather than external phloem. Well, in addition to external phloem, actually. In addition, Myrtales have hypanthium and a single style. And so, Myrtaceae itself, you're going to learn on your own. I've got like one slide on them. But we're going to really focus on the melastomes. So Melastomataceae, 150 genera, 3,000 species. It's usually pantropical, of course including subtropics. That's Rexia, that's what you usually see around here. In that genus, not that exact species. Melastomes come in herbs, shrubs, vines, or trees. You're going to get this cortical and or pith vascular bundles, and they generally have very complex hairs, whether it's dendritic or kind of the T shape. They're always kind of just really goofy hairs when you look at them under a scope. In addition, you can nearly always distinguish a melastome by these really distinct venation patterns. It's just really obvious, but the secondary veins always diverge from the base and join at the apex, and then you'll have these tertiary veins perpendicular to the midrib. I mean, when you look at a melastome, you're like, that's obviously a melastome, just because that venation is so pronounced. In terms of the flowers, they're always bisexual. They always have a very well-developed hypanthium. Sepals can vary between 3 and 5, same with the petals. Stamens can also vary between 6 and 10. But you're going to always have these kind of bent filaments that twist upon opening, which kind of twist the anthers to one side of the flower. And then the anthers themselves have these apical pores or longitudinal slits from which the pollen actually is released. Carpels 2 to 10, usually fused, superior to inferior ovary. The fruits, you're gonna have these locucidal capsules or berries. Again, here's Rexia, our go-to melastome. But here are some other awesome melastomes. I mean, we've got better images of the anthers, but you can see in each case they just kind of, the filaments have a weird twist, which leaves the stamens themselves going to one side, or the anthers themselves kind of going to one side. There we go. So these are the filaments, these are the anthers. You can see in each case the filaments kind of twist. Again, our go-to melastome example is Rexia, native to the southeast US, also used as an ornamental. So that's basically Myrtales. Moving on to Brassicales. Brassicales has 15 families. Of course, the main one that we all know is Brassicaceae. The synapomorphies, of course, include DNA, but also these glucosinolates or mustard oil glycosides. And these plants produce them in order to prevent herbivory. This mustard oil was originally thought to have evolved independently in a number of different families, but of course molecular data brought all those families more or less together, minus these two genera of euphorbs. So they have found that there are two independent origins of glucosinolates in brassicales, but also in these two weird euphorbs. Any questions? As mentioned, here's glucosinolate itself. Anti-herbivory, found in different mustards and brassica species, broccoli, and it's the main flavor when we eat mustard. That kind of acidic. No, what is mustard flavor? Kind of that burn, that bite, right? Brassicaceae used to be called cruciferae, otherwise known as the mustard family. You've got 356 genera, about 4,000 species. The name comes from crossbearer, just because I think in every species you have these 4 petals, more or less in the shape of a cross. But the issue is that those 4 petals in cross shape don't necessarily only apply to Brassicaceae, so don't use that as like a distinguishing feature, because you can have that in other families as well. As with a lot of new classifications, Brassicaceae has expanded quite a bit in the last 10 years with a lot of molecular data. So Brassicaceae has trees, shrubs, herbs. Of course, it has glucosinolates. The leaves can range from alternate or spiral. Occasionally, you'll have these basal rosettes. Does anyone know what Arabidopsis looks like? So that's a basal rosette, right? It's kind of just like sitting at the ground and kind of just tosses out leaves left and right. The leaves themselves can be simple or compound. They nearly all are pubescent in some way or shape, between simple to these star-shaped stellate hairs. Stipules are off and on. The inflorescences are indeterminate, so they kind of just like keep growing and growing. You're gonna have blooming from the base of the inflorescence and just working its way up the inflorescence. The flowers are nearly always bisexual. You can have actinomorphic or zygomorphic. And you're gonna have these gynophores, which are kind of stalks on which the gynecium sit. Make sense? Sepals, we've got 4 petals, you've got 4. Again, they usually create this kind of cross shape. Stamens typically have 6. And in a lot of cases, you're gonna have these 4 long and 2 shorts, otherwise known as tetradynamis. Sometimes you'll have all equal length. Okay, so here are some examples. You can see that pretty cross shape. I think we've got a better view of the anthers somewhere else, but this is kind of just showing off the petals. There we go. Tetradynamous stamens. So you're gonna have these long, and then these shorter ones. And same here, long, and these two goofy short ones. So you're gonna have two fused carpels, nearly always superior ovary. You're gonna have parietal placentation, but sometimes with this false septum, separating the locules into two parts. You're gonna have the placentas form this thick ring around the fruit himself, called a replum, unique to Brassicaceae. Here are some pretty pictures. So, this kind of connecting strand is the placenta itself. This kind of internal shiny bit is the false septum, and then this should be going just like to the edge itself for the replum. So the fruits, you can either have capsules or berries. These two-part capsules, when they have the replum and false septum, are called silicles and siliques. It kind of look like beans, but kind of pointier, bean pods, legumes. But you're gonna generally have lots of variation in terms of fruit morphology, but it's an important taxonomic character. Silicles and siliques are kind of a defining feature of Brassicaceae. Along with that, the flower features. Here we go. So, here are the siliques. You can see what I mean by they kind of look like green beans, but they're typically pointier, and in a lot of cases you're going to get the replum, and here are silicles, and it's more or less the same as a silique, but kind of just more compressed. Yeah, so this is like a mustard pod. So this is, I think, mustard or canola, Brassica napus. Yeah, so you've got the typical inflorescence, the four-petaled flowers, you've got the tetradynamous anthers, and the typical kind of siliques.